continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Back with Dave and Mecky's Shiny Side Out on Revolution Radio, the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So, push the donate button and you can maybe get some merch. Buy some merch. Do that. Tell other people about this station. Listen to something from the archives, which is free. And then maybe tell someone else where you learnt that information. It's Revolution Radio is the answer to all those. It's the answer to all your problems. Actually, that's too broad. Maybe it isn't. But, enjoy it while it's here. And while we're here, and while information is still allowed to be broadcast. Wow, that's a big statement right there. Thanks for listening to Revolution Radio, by the way. We're halfway through show number 596.
690 at 500.
Ooh, well done. Very, very sharp. And we're talking about the confusion of languages. This is part 7 in a show arc. And, look, if you don't know what the confusion of language is all about, it comes from historical mentions of there being a time when we could all, let's say, communicate with the same language. I don't want to say speak. Communicate with the same language. We all were understood. We understood each other. And then we were separated into multiple languages, seemingly on purpose. Says each one of the cultures we've previously read out in all the other shows. There is also the same time, the parallel with the Tower of Babel, or a construction of something, or trying to get to heaven. Trying to get up to where the gods lived. Whatever the description is irrelevant. We were trying to get there. And that was destroyed. Our efforts were nullified. And then we were spread. But there was also a disaster in the middle of that. And post-disaster, we all had different languages. So we couldn't communicate. Therefore, we couldn't... what's it called, Mecky? Assemble. So we couldn't assemble...
Avengers!
Be united against the ones above, whoever they are. They differ slightly amongst all the different descriptions, but overall it appears as those descriptions themselves were just their way of being able to describe what they saw or what they knew.
Correct, and they're all different when it comes to language confusion. They fall into 2 categories. One, they knew they were being punished for something, right? Mm-hmm. And that falls into categories, like they knew they were punished for something specifically or something vague.
Yes.
And the ones that knew what they were punished for specifically, that was usually to do with building a structure that tried to reach into heaven or into something high up or something.
Yeah.
Right? Then the second category that they had just had confusion of languages happened to them, and they had no idea. It just happened. There was a time everybody went mad and they no longer spoke the same language, and we don't know why it happened, but there it is. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because, that makes, if it were an actual event, that makes the most sense. Because if it was just cultural bleed, let's say, so it's all just this Tower of Babel, that's all this. When Christians went everywhere, they're talking about the Bible, so all the native people of the world took on the Tower of Babel story. Okay. But then they should all have taken on the Tower of Babel story, with local variations, of course, but they didn't. They didn't. What they did was they had their own stories. And especially the people that had no idea why it happened. It happened, but they didn't know why. We just went mad. People just went mad. They couldn't speak the same language anymore. What happened? So that's important. to understand. Now, Dave very kindly took us to almost the end, excuse me, of this show arc. And the next set of documents came from the CIA Freedom of Information site, foia.cia.gov and /reading room, okay, or www.cia.gov/reading room. That's where they're all from. And I'm nowhere near done with that reading room yet. I can tell you that. Nowhere near done. And the funny thing is this. We couldn't find these articles anywhere on the net. So these articles are, okay, this is how it works on the Freedom of Information side. I need to understand this before we go into the articles. There's a summary of the article, right? Which is in, it's plain text. And it's really whatever the bot or the AI or whatever could take out of the document. It is jumbled. It's just taken straight from the photostat, because the article itself, if it's an article or report or whatever, is just a photostat. It's an Adobe document, but it's really just, you can see it's a photocopy, right? So somebody turned a photocopy into a PDF.
And they gleaned all the necessary information as what we call as metadata.
Correct.
Which is searchable.
Yeah. And it's just, but it's ugly when you try to put it into the text.
Yeah.
It's really ugly. So, interestingly enough, some of these articles, and I think it's even the first article that we're going to share with you, there are 4 pages missing from the PDF. So the PDF, again, is a photocopy of the original article, but it's missing 4 pages in the middle. So I can't find it on the net. If you can find it, please go ahead. I will post the name of the PDF into the chat as we speak. Here we go. Give me a second.
I'll put the website in there so people can do this.
Fantastic. Thanks, buddy. So this is the first article. Here we go. You can have a look at it yourself. And you should be able to get to it. That's just the link. Okay, so the first article is called Telepathy Could Be Real. Document type is CREST. Collection of documents it comes from is called the Stargate document collection. The CIA document number is CIA-RD P96-00787R 0002000080050-9, and page count is 3, which is not true. It's true for this document because that page is missing. Now it was released. So this document was created in 2016. It was first released in 1998, but it was published in 1976. 1976. This article is from 1976. It was released to us in the world in 1998, and this particular document in this site was created in 2016. And it says here approved for release. And we'll share it with you now. Although 58% of all Americans believe they have had telepathic experiences, researchers are just now beginning to corner it. 1976. The people they study, talented telepathic receivers, produce results that defy mere luck. Mark Twain, the author of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and a member of the Psychical Society of England, was especially interested in mental telegraphy. His interest grew out of dozens of personal experiences too freakish to write off as anything but telepathy. In 1878, he wrote, "Doubtless, the something which conveys our thoughts through the air from brain to brain is a finer and subtler form of electricity. And all we need to do is to find out how to capture it and how to force it to do its work, as we have had to do in the case of the electric currents. Before the day of telegraphs, neither of these marvels would have seemed any easier to achieve than the other." Okay, that's the Mark Twain quote. Mm-hmm. Back to the article. We are now in the age of television and the video phone, and researchers are still trying, now video phone, again, this is 1976, okay, and researchers are still trying to capture the elusive telepathic force. The trouble is that telepathy won't stand still. Parapsychologists like modern-day Leeuwenhoeks, peering through primitive microscopes at tiny creatures dancing in swamp water. Each time somebody calls out, "I've got the little bugger, come take a look. The little bugger slips out of view or hides under a blade of swamp grass. Time after time, people who initially show psychic talent lose their skill as the researchers study them, and their success scores drop. The phenomenon is so dependable that parapsychologists call it the decline effect. Critics point to it as evidence that there was never anything paranormal to begin with. Sometimes a person will get lucky, but eventually the laws of chance will win out. Parapsychologists aren't convinced because the beginning scores are often so high that it is difficult to believe that luck has anything to do with it. Charles Todd of the University of California at Davis is trying something that may explain the decline effect and at the same time give the researcher a way to nail psychic phenomena down flat. Todd wondered if people with telepathic talent weren't being put on what if his efforts go unrewarded. If a psychic reads a couple of hundred telepathic messages without payoff, he's on an extinction schedule. What parapsychologists ought to do, Todd argues, is to put the psychic gifted on a reinforcement schedule. The payoff might consist simply of telling the psychic when he has scored a hit. But Todd warns that the pupil should have some psychic ability to begin with. No matter how good a training program is, we can't teach a dog to fly or a pigeon to bark. To develop someone into a reliable psychic performer, a researcher must start with a person who has at least a little ESP. Dave?
Yeah. Do you know who? I'm just going to say, Mark Twain to me is like Doc from...
I know, right?
from Back to the Future. He was really a person of smarts put into a time when there wasn't any. I see that. His view of the world, his observations were excruciatingly accurate.
Yeah.
And he just didn't, he sadly, you know what, if he was a neighbour of mine, I'm sure he would have got on quite well. Just want to put that out there. Striving psychics. To find the talented minority, Tart screened over 1,500 college students. Of these, 138 showed promise. These were further screened to cull those who might have been lucky on their first tests. 25 of Tart's most promising students went on to complete the main study. The psychic's job was to guess which of a series of lights would go on. A sender, not one of the gifted 25, sat in another room. He would get an early warning of which light was about to go on and would send that information mentally to the receiver. And now I wait.
Yeah, and this unfortunately is where 4 pages are missing from the CIA photostat. And for the life of me, I cannot find the article anywhere online or the study that Tart conducted. If any of you have any knowledge of the study by Tart or another one here by Fouts, or it's called Fouts Scribbage, please let us know, because these 4 pages are really critical, in my opinion. Now, this is how far we have gone. Now, Dave is going to continue, but unfortunately, he's going to go into something else. But it's important that we go through it. Go ahead, Dave. No, remember, 4 pages are missing, and Dave is now picking up again.
In another series of games, Fouts Scribbage playing telepather tried to help as well as interfere with his wife's performance. As before, negative something right, but it doesn't tell him...
The text is jumbled. I do apologize.
That's fine.
Completely jumbled.
I'll just read it as it is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell him that would leap out at you from the thoughts seemed to produce lower what that something was. Pattern of wavy lines on an electro scores, but attempts to raise her scores brain signals ... by the fact that some equipment called a period analyzer. The victim in these scribbage guesses are just that, guesses. But the picked it up. We're still a long way. Studies was not aware of her husband's psychic has no way of knowing when from having a psychic thermometer efforts, or even that an experiment was correct answer came from psychic in, but researchers at Stanford research underway. Fouts admits that the maybe gap site, and when it was just a lucky stab. Institute in Palo Alto, California, inference that took place might have to beat that problem. Researchers will tend to continue the search, come from non-verbal cues, such as have to find a psychic indicator. In a recent poll conducted by the National Opinion Research Center, 58% of those surveys said that they believed they had one or more telepathic experiences. But even the baptized believer in parapsychology has to admit that it is a field with some mushy ground. It is hard to find a study that doesn't have a lot of ifs and maybes in it. Mekki.
And then comes a jumbled section again. The conversation of parapsychology is apt to shift from the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle to the Loch Ness Monster. The temptation is to latch onto one of those low credibility subjects and dismiss telepathy and related phenomena as the psychedelic mentations of a spooky group. Just file them away with the witches, the shaman, and the root doctors and forget them. Now, and this is really important. I want everybody to just reflect on this point just for a second. If you can, I guess, tarnish something by associating it with something else, then that's the easiest way to never ever talk about it again. Mm-hmm. One of the things that was very clear in Graham Hancock's research, when he spoke to historians, archaeologists, especially the younger generation, they told him flat out, if we look at any of the stuff that you're looking at, we will not have any grants, we will not be able to do anything.
That's right.
Okay, and it's the same when it comes to parapsychology and research into ESP phenomena, etc. It is considered a woo-woo science. It's not taken seriously. Of course, it is taken seriously by the governments and the 3 and 5 and 4 letter agencies, but it's not taken seriously, it is not for general consumption, is really the point here. And just, witches and shamans and root doctors, that's just crazy stuff. Well, is it? Why would the CIA classify a document in 1976 only to release it 20 years later with 4 pages missing? Mm-hmm. Makes no sense, right? Now let's go back to the text. Inflating our flat world. But remember that in the early 1960s, just about everybody was convinced that the yogi miracle workers were fakes. Those skinny fellows with their fruit and nut diets and put their guts through a rough gymnastics workout. A few scientists studied them as they altered their body pressure or changed the temperature of their hands, but almost no one believed that what they did could really be done. Sloppy research. Clever trickery. Any intelligent, educated person knew that it was impossible, for example, to voluntarily control one's blood pressure. Then Neil Miller and other psychologists taught people to do just that.
Wow.
Now, bear in mind, this was written in 1976, Dave.
Mm-hmm. Their insides upside down. The success of Miller and all did more than change our ideas about the nuts and bolts of the nervous system. It inflated our flat world into a sphere connecting east and west. And if the heart-stopping yogi can no longer be dismissed as a clever trickster, how can we ignore the feat of S3, who outguessed Tart's machine at odds of, my goodness me, it's a quadrillion to 1. 2.5 quadrillion to 1. No honest statistician can shrug off as a run of good luck. No, we're not right where we were 15 years ago when those skinny yogis turned their insides upside down. Either it's a hoax or it's real? We probably won't have an answer to that question until some tough-minded scientist like Neil Miller takes a crack at it. He might simply prove that all those confident, jeering skeptics were right, after all, but it's disconcerting to think that it might come out the other way. Your local high school might one day offer a course in telepathy as it now does typing. I remember actually seeing the typing courses you could do in California high school. And think of how different your life would be if your thoughts were no longer private property. I see you thinking about it. Paul Chance joined Psychology Today in 1972 as manuscripts editor and became assistant managing editor. He took a master's degree in counseling from the University of Northern Colorado, that's better, and a PhD in psychology from the Yulin State University, a rigorous methodologist. Chance went to Tart's lab to see his telepathy setup. And then there's a letter T and there's a source URL.
And this article, in my mind, is probably one of the most important articles we've come across. And it really kills me that it's incomplete. So anybody out there that can find a reference, because I'm still looking for it. These studies aren't even, I can't even find the studies. They're talking about Paul Chance. Sorry, Paul Chance actually wrote this article, but they're talking about Miller and Tart. Mm-hmm. Some I have found, a lot I haven't. And it really kills me, I tell you. But there's one article further down that was also taken from the CIA website. The next one is freely available though, and this is a really interesting one. And this is called A Primary Quantum Model of Telepathy, but it does make reference to research which I can't access. So clearly these people in China, mind you, have access to research that I in the West cannot get to. It's written by Zhao Chan and the scientists work team of electromagnetic wave velocity Chinese Institute of Electronics in Changping district in Beijing. Email here as well. And now in this paper, we give a primary quantum theoretical model of telepathy, believe it or not, based on the principles of quantum superluminal communication, QSC. Some feasible experimental suggestions are presented. The possible application of telepathy as one kind of new communication means is also discussed. All historical experience confirms that men might not achieve the possible if they had not time and again reached out for the impossible. That's a quote by Max Weber. And they're not talking about psychotronics. This is not psychotronics. Introduction, and then I hand it over to my esteemed colleague. The physical nature of psi phenomena, such as telepathy, is an important problem in the life information science. Scientists have confirmed the existence of telepathy phenomena through many strict experiments. Then can modern science, e.g. quantum theory, provide a scientific explanation for telepathy phenomena? So just this first paragraph here, these Chinese scientists, they said, telepathy is a thing. But how do we explain it? Just do you understand what I'm saying? They're saying, yes, it is something that exists, but how do we explain it? In this paper, we will seek the possible quantum nature of telepathy from both theoretical and experimental respects and present a primary quantum model of telepathy phenomena. It will be shown that according to the principle of quantum superluminal communication, QSC, quantum theory can in principle provide a scientific explanation of telepathy phenomena. And some experiments have indicated the validity of this explanation. Furthermore, we will propose a series of feasible experimental schemes to test the quantum model and discuss the technical possibility of realizing controllable and applicable human-brain communication on the basis of the proposed experimental schemes. Lastly, we give some remarks and expectations about the technical virtue and application foreground of such communication means. Dave?
Number 2, the principle of quantum superluminal communication, QSC. It is well known that even though present quantum theory permits the existence of quantum non-locality, it doesn't permit the realization of quantum superluminal communication. However, when considering the dynamical collapse of wave function and the direct intervention of consciousness of the observer, QSC can be realized in principle. Here we will briefly introduce the principle of QSC. The concrete method is via distinguishing the non-orthogonal quantum states. And Meki significantly abbreviated, but we have the whole research paper. Number 3, a telepathy experiment and its possible quantum explanation. Even though some superphysical phenomena may not be real, telepathy does exist. Its usual display is that between the familiar people, say twins, relatives or friends, one can perceive the other's happening, say being sick or being injured, etc., at a distance. Many people have this kind of experience. At present, the telepathy phenomena has been confirmed by some strict scientific experiments and are being studied by more scientists. One of the most convincing experiments was done in 1994 by Grinberg and Zeil-Bergbaum and all. In their experiment, pairs of subjects were first allowed to meditate together and then put into 2 semi-silent Faraday chambers 14.5 meters apart. Their EEG activities are registered by 2 EEG machines. One subject of each pair was stimulated by 100 flashes of random intervals. Each photostimulation resulted in an evoked potentials for the stimulated subject. It is observed that when he stimulated subject showed, would be the, when the stimulated subject showed distinct evoked potentials, the non-stimulated subject showed transferred potentials, similar to the evoked potentials in the stimulated subject. At the same time, the subjects both felt their interaction had been successfully completed. Since the subjects were separated by the soundproof Faraday cages or chambers, this experiment guarantees that neither sensory signals nor electromagnetic signals is the means of communication, and thus strictly demonstrate the existence of non-local correlations between human brains. In the following, we will analyze the above telepathy experiment in terms of the principle of quantum superlineal communication. According to the principle of QSC, the proper combination of dynamical collapse of wave function and consciousness of observer will permit the non-electromagnetic superluminal transmission of information. It will be shown that this may provide a possible explanation of the above telepathy experimental results and indicate that the telepathy process may be realized based on the quantum process in brains. According to the principle of QSC, for a conscious being, the QSC condition is that his perception time for the definite state is shorter than the dynamical collapse time of the perceived quantum superposition state. And the time difference is large enough for the conscious being to identify. Now, in the above experiment, this condition is indeed satisfied as implied by the experimental results. On one hand, the quantum entanglement state between the subjects A and B in the experiment, which is formed by meditative interaction and can be written as ...
So we didn't replicate the formula here. It is there, and if anybody is interested, I'm more than happy to send it to you. But it would be too difficult to read it out. It is just a mathematical formula trying to express the experiment. That's all.
Well, you can continue.
Okay, so it can hold for a long time until the experiment is completed. Then there appears the observed similarity between the evoked and transferred potential. This indicates that the dynamical collapse time of the quantum entanglement state is also very long, say several tens of minutes. On the other hand, the perception time of the subjects for the definite state is generally of the orders of 0.1 of a second. Thus, in the experiment, the collapse time of the entanglement state or superposition state is evidently much longer than the perception time of the subject for the defined state or the definite state. And the time difference is also large enough for the subject to identify, i.e., the QSC condition is naturally satisfied in the experiment. Once the required QSC condition is satisfied, realizing QSC and explaining telepathy will be probable. According to the principle of QSC, the subject satisfying the QSC condition will possess different perceptions for the superposition state and definite state. As revealed in the experiment, when the subject A is not stimulated and the quantum entanglement state still holds, the subject B will be in a superposition state and he has no distinct feeling related to the state. Whereas, when subject A is stimulated and the quantum entanglement state collapses, the subject B will be in a definite state and he does have a distinct feeling that the interaction has been successfully completed. Then QSC can be realized if we encode the different stimulating operations to subject A, and correspondingly the codes through the different feelings or EEG activities of subject B. This may also naturally explain the telepathy phenomenon between the subjects.
Number 4, a quantum theoretical model of telepathy process. On the basis of the principle of QSC and the above analysis, we will present a primary theoretical model of telepathy process. In this model, the telepathy process includes these 3 phases. Phase 1, form the quantum entanglement state of brains. During this phase, the quantum states of the brains of the telepathy subjects are entangled. Here we give a simple way to entangle the quantum states of brains. Suppose 2 photons are in the entanglement state, and they respectively enter the eyes of the 2 subjects A and B, for instance. Then, after interaction, the entanglement state of these 2 brains will be formed according to quantum evolution law. Here we assume the photons are absorbed in the process. In the above experiment, this step is realized by the meditative interaction between the subjects. Mekiitis had a kind of newsflash here.
Mm-hmm.
You know that brain erasing tool from Men in Black?
Yeah.
People
I know,
see
right?
the light, Meki. They see that light, that thing, and suddenly you can just impose anything upon them. And while the dwell time of that is being implanted, that's all they remember.
Yeah.
Phase 2, hold the entanglement state of brains. The formed entanglement state of brains may be some kind of microscopic quantum state. It can hold for a long time until measurement is made to result in its collapse process. According to the principle of QSC, the holding time should be much longer than the usual perception time of the subjects. It is argued that this condition may be satisfied in some places of the brain. In the above experiment, the entanglement state is held by the subjects feeling each other's presence at a distance. And the last phase, phase 3, collapse of the entanglement state of brains. When the entanglement state of brains is collapsed by a certain measurement on one of the subjects, the brain states of both subjects turn to be definite states from entanglement state, and the other subject will perceive the change at a distance. Here, the telepathy between the subjects appears. when in the entanglement state or superposition state, no definite perception exists, while when the superposition state collapses to a definite state, definite perception can appear. In the above experiment, this step is realized by stimulating subject A with 100 flashes, and when the entanglement state is collapsed by the stimulation, the subject feels that their interaction has been successfully completed. It should be stressed that even though the above quantum model can in principle provide a scientific explanation for telepathy phenomena, there are still two left technical problems. One is to find a position in the brain where the holding time of quantum superposition state can be much longer than the usual perception time, namely that test the existence of QSC condition in human brains. The other is to study how the brain generates the high-level telepathy information from the low-level one transmitted through the above QSC means. This closely relates to present neuroscience study. In one word, these problems need to be deeply studied in experiments. In the following, we will further suggest some experimental schemes that may help to solve the problems.
And just as by way of explanation, this is something that's translated from the Chinese, and we haven't
That's fine.
made any corrections to the test.
No.
Now, 5, some further experimental schemes. In order to test the existence of QSC condition in human brains and confirm the above primary quantum model of telepathy phenomena, we propose the following experimental schemes. 1. Control experiment. Produce some photons with a certain frequency. Input them to the eyes of the subject. Test and record the perception time of the subject through EEG recording device or his oral description. 2. Quantum perception experiment 1. Produce the quantum space superposition state of the photons with the same frequency. Input one branch of the superposition state to the eyes of the subject and let the other branch freely spread. Not input to the measuring device. Test whether the subject perceives the photons during the normal perception time. 3. Quantum perception experiment 2. Produce the quantum space superposition state of the photons with the same frequency. Input both branches of the superposition state to the eyes of the subject. Test whether the subject perceives the photons during the normal perception time. 4. Perception entanglement experiment 1. Produce the quantum space superposition state of the photons with the same frequency. Input the branches of the superposition state to the eyes of 2 independent subjects respectively. Test whether the subjects perceive the photons during the normal perception time. It is suggested that the subjects are unfamiliar with each other before the experiment, which can be further confirmed by the phase incoherence of their EEG signals. If the subjects can only perceive the photons after a time interval much longer than the normal perception time in any of the above experiments, then we will have confirmed the existence of QSC condition in human brains. Besides, we suggest the subjects in the above experiments should be composed of 3 independent groups at least. The subjects in the first group are in normal state. The subjects in the second group are in a meditation state, and the subjects in the third group are in a Qigong state. Now, it's interesting that Qigong is prosecuted by the Chinese government.
That's the Falun Gong practice, isn't it?
That's correct. 5. Perceptions entanglement experiment 2. Produce the quantum space superposition state of the photons with the same frequency. Input the branches of the superposition state to the eyes of 2 independent isolated subjects respectively. Then, using flashes, stimulate one of the subjects at random intervals. Record his evoked potentials and the corresponding transferred potentials of the other subject. Test whether there exists statistical relevance between these 2 potentials. At the same time, ask the subjects whether they had some kind of perception relating to the stimulation. The existence of this kind of perception will have confirmed the above primary quantum model, and it can be used to realize controllable human-brain communication. This experiment can be taken as the quantum version of Grinberg-Zillebaum's experiment that Dave referred to earlier. Right. Okay. The further experimental suggestions are stated as follows. 1. Complete the experiment at much longer distance, say longer than the bound distance of 40 kilometers, in which the possible classical signals with light speed can't be used to explain the statistical relevance between the potentials of the subject. Thus, we can strictly confirm that telepathy is one kind of superluminal and non-electromagnetic phenomena, and further confirm the existence of QSC conditioned human brains. Now, superluminal, of course, meaning faster than the speed of light. Faster than the speed of light. Second suggestion, replace the flashes with flickering light. Here, the evoked potentials of the stimulated subject will contain some measurable frequency information. It is expected that the corresponding transferred potentials of the other subjects will contain the same measurable frequency information. Then we can use the transferred frequency information to realize non-electromagnetic and superluminal human brain communication more reliably. Dave?
Totally. I'm getting this. I want to talk to you after the show. Number 6, remarks and expectations. If our quantum model of telepathy is confirmed by the experiments, then it can be naturally used as one new kind of quantum superluminal communication. Well, its means anyway. Compared with the conventional wire and wireless communications, such new kind of communication will undoubtedly have more advantages. First, the transfer delay of QSC is irrelevant to the communication distance. It can be 0 in principle, thus QSC is the fastest communication means. Secondly, the carriers of information may not pass the space between the sender and the receiver for QSC. Thus, the communication process is not influenced by the in-between environment. And QSC is one kind of complete anti-jamming communication means. No one can cut in. There's no hacker's ability. Thirdly, since the carriers of information can only be stored in the sender and receiver for QSC, the third party can't eavesdrop. I actually preface that. The transferred information, for instance, thus QSC is the most secret communication means. Lastly, there is no electromagnetic radiation for QSC, and it is one kind of green communication means, obviously through coloured classification that we're talking here. Certainly the realization of QSC will undoubtedly require the close combination of biological technology, quantum technology, and communication technology. Looking from long views, we should deeply study the perception process, e.g. the perception process about quantum superposition state of our human brains, and try to find the perception unit in order to achieve practical QSC. On the basis of this study, we may develop the more advanced perception simulation technology and integrate the perception function in a tiny biological chip. I think that's a mistake. It's not a mistake in the text, I think it's a mistake going down a path. This will help to develop the genuine QSC products. It may be forecasted that QSC will become the main communication means in the near future, not long future, not medium future, near future. Space will no longer be the obstacle of communication, and people can have real-time talks between any faraway distances. At the same time, QSC will be one kind of completely anti-jamming, I'm jamming.
You're jamming, baby.
Secret and green communication means. These are not just dreams, and science may take a walk into such miraculous QSC times in 20 or 30 years. Let's try hard and expect it together. That's a quantum belief right there.
Yeah, that's a Chinese translation. Again, this is an article, a publication, a scientific tip, and again, happy to. This is actually the whole thing in the chat room if you want to see it. 1 second, I'll give it to you, so you can follow it yourself if you want. But essentially, oops, there we go. This is essentially the link to that paper, and this paper, in no uncertain terms, states that telepathy is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying, oh, we're testing it. No. It's a thing. The purpose of this paper was to explain the effect, not see if the effect exists. No. The question is now, how do we explain telepathy? How do we explain it? What is going on here, right? So let's be very clear here. This is not a question of whether or not telepathy exists. This is a question of, well, how does it work? Why does it work? What's happening here? This is really important.
I just want to say collective experience, Becky. That's my code word right now.
100%.
Yeah.
Now, but you're right. Now the next.
Do we have time? 10 minutes.
We do. It's very short.
Go. Your time starts now.
The next was taken from the CIA Freedom of Information Act page. It's called "The Orbitals of Consciousness: a Neurosynthetic Approach to the Discrete Levels of Conscious Experience." Sounds innocuous enough, does it not?
If one can discern what they mean. Go.
Yeah. So it was approved for release in 2001. I'm not entirely sure when it was written, but it looks here from the source material. It was published in 1983 with source material from the 60s and 70s. So there's a number of papers that underlie it. And I think this article here, as such as it exists, and there's a lot missing, by the way. So, a neurosynthetic approach to the discrete levels of consciousness experience, Jacobo Grinberg Zillebaum, Facultad de Psicología, Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, Ciudad Universidad, Mexico City University, etc., etc. So this is from the University of Mexico City. And the paper was clearly published there. And a connection is traced from the behavior of electrons existing only in particular locations, orbitals, around their nucleus, to discrete levels of conscious experience. According to the synthetic theory, the structure of experience is the result of an interaction between an energetic field created by the brain, the neuronal field, and the energetic structure of space, the quantum field. Conscious experience appears when a central process of focuses this interaction. It is postulated that this focalization process can only arise in some discrete portions of the synthetic continuum, thus also activating discrete levels of conscious experience. And again, this is the work that the previous paper we just read to you is referring to. Theoretical introduction. When the neuronal field, Grinberg, Zillebaum, 1982, interacts with the quantum field, Capra, 1976, a hypercomplex energetic interference pattern is created. Again, Grinberg, Zillebaum, 1983. This interference pattern constitutes the energetic structure of perceptual experience. This energetic structure is not localized in space, and hence its conscious appearance as an individual conscious experience requires a focalization operation. This focalization involves a new interaction between the interference pattern and the central processor responsible for activating a hypothetical directionality factor. Grinberg, Zillebaum, 1981. The directionality factor stimulates a limited portion of the interference pattern, transforming its energetic structure into a qualitatively distinct perceptual experience. This purely energetic structure of the perceptual experience, the interference pattern in space, is thus transformed into the dimension of a vividly conscious experience. The central processor responsible for the activity of the directionality factor is intimately related to the self or real observer, known in different traditions as being, self, or Purusha, and that's all there was of this article. There's a lot more. I just don't have it because they didn't photocopy it.
Wow. That's
so
this revelation, Becky, right now, right here, right now in this show, is so profound.
I know, right? The thing is this: I've looked for these people.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find the research, man.
Yeah.
Can't find
I don't think I'll get this out anytime soon.
Yeah, I can find some of it. Let me clarify. I can find some of it. I cannot find this specific stuff. And the only place I found it, like when I search it, and I'm not just doing the Google search, by the way, is the CIA site.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I can find the scientists. So let's be clear here. Jacob Grinberg, he's the Grinberg or Zillebaum, right? He disappeared December 8, 1994, age 47. Let me repeat that. He disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote more than... Okay, so this is who he is. Known as Jacob Greenberg, was a Mexican scientist, neurophysiologist, and psychologist. He studied Mexican shamanism, Eastern disciplines, meditation, astrology, and telepathy, using his own interpretation of a scientific method. He wrote more than 50 books about these subjects. Greenberg disappeared in December of 1994.
Wow.
Since December 8, 1994, Greenberg has been missing. On December 12th, his family prepared a party for him to celebrate his 48th birthday, but he did not show up. It was common for him to make spontaneous travels or just not answer his phone for days, which is why his disappearance did not seem odd to his family in the beginning. There are many conspiracy theories surrounding Greenberg's disappearance. Now, the synteny theory. Greenberg's synteny theory, we just discussed, states that there's a continuous space of energy and the common human can only perceive a part of it. The result of this process is what everyone understands as reality. This theory tries to answer the question of the creation of the experience. The book where it is mentioned, El Cerebro Consciente, was translated into 7 languages. So, this is the guy whose papers was classified by the CIA and who decided to disappear in 1994, a couple of days before his 48th birthday. Dave, I don't know, man.
And unless he was vacuumed up by the CIA and is now working in some bunker under a different name, unless that's the case, or he disappeared into the quantum foam, Mackie.
Right.
I don't know. I couldn't explain it. I don't think someone would want to take him out for knowing what he discovered, but rather utilize the skill.
Yeah, look, possibly. But the thing is, the paper we just shared, the Chinese paper, this is what they're saying in the paper. This experiment can be taken as the quantum version of Greenberg-Zilberbaum's experiment.
That's right.
They're referring to him.
Yeah, directly.
Okay, so, again.
Well, look, Mickey, you and I are familiar with people who have discovered something and then they just get whooshed away. Entire departments, including all of their operating equipment, can get whooshed away, never to be seen again. Right?
Yeah, firsthand. Yeah.
Yep. So that's why I kind of lean that way, rather than just because he disappeared doesn't mean he's no longer with us.
No.
It would be lovely to understand that this researcher is still with us today.
Yeah. Oh, that would be awesome, buddy.
Now
he would be in his. Oh, he'd be close to his. He's 77. He'd be 77 now.
No, that's good. Respect.
But I agree with you. But the thing is, he's been missing for 28 years, 8 months, and 4 days, right, as of today. And that's all she wrote. So.
But then I'm gonna press upon you again, for the audience's benefit, that the fact that the CIA has these documents and didn't even bother to, it removed some portions of these documents, and they're available today in the CIA. What was their interest? What could they possibly be interested in?
Well, it is clear, I think, and this is my closing remark here. It is clear, in my mind, that telepathy is a thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's real, right?
Yeah, and now we're at the point of trying to understand what it is. And I also postulate further that it was the original language of the human race.
Yes.
Sorry, the original form of communication of the human race. Right? Not thinking words at each other, but concepts, thoughts, feelings.
That's right.
Etc.
It's broadband, Becky. Yeah. It's broadband communication between humans.
Yeah.
Non-local. Think about that. It is quantum.
And that makes sense. Spooky
Totally.
action at a distance. Makes perfect sense.
And for all those people who, are into the quantum world, and don't believe that, try to obfuscate the truth from the research, it just drives me, it irks me, Mackie. It really does.
But this whole academic self-censorship or even deliberate censorship drives me up the wall in every discipline.
Likewise. Guess what? This is the end. So this is 2 hours are now done. We'll see you next week, but we'll see you Tuesday and Thursday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern US time, and again on Shiny Side Out. But in the meantime, listen to Jer Bears, catch his show coming up next after hours. Love your work, and